So let's return to our example of the hypothetical family. We have mom and dad and two elementary school-aged children. If these folks, these perfect strangers, manage to show up on a Sunday morning, and let's say they've never been to a church service, let's say they've never been members of a church, what are the odds that our worship will leave them wanting more? What are the odds that what we do on a Sunday will have them coming back the following Sunday? How often do we actually see that happen? What are the odds that this family will understand our prayers, the lyrics to our hymns, our sermons? Might there need to be discernment about what their needs are? For us, discernment in evangelism, it just means taking a look in the mirror. It means asking, whose will are we following? When we reach a fork in the road, with tradition on one side and evangelism on the other, which path do we choose? When my pastor asked the question about a gay wedding, he was under no illusion. He wasn't trying to turn his church into an affirming congregation. He was trying to teach them about discernment. And so, I'm not asking a question about worship style because I have a plan to make us into a contemporary church. I'm asking the question because Christian discernment requires us to. When there is an opportunity to choose the relationship instead of the rule book, we are obligated to discern what is the path forward. We are obligated to ask if our church is putting God's will first. So let me end with an example. Now, I'm fond of bringing up the church plant I helped found in Austin, Texas, because it sent me into vocational ministry. I am still drawing on the lessons I learned there. But you have to know, this church was planted in the gymnasium of a low-income school right in urban downtown Austin. And in the earliest years, the church prided itself on sending every dollar of rent paid into the needs of the school. It was a major point of pride that we were a successful and growing church without a building. But after some time, it became clear that we needed some permanent space for church offices. We needed a refuge for abused women, for evicted families. We needed our own space to take the next step of the journey God was leading. And so the first church office we found was with an historic but dying Southern Baptist church. And their building was large because it belonged to a former era in which the pews were full. And so they jumped at the chance to house our small, young, growing Baptist church plant. They gave us a large room for very cheap. And in the early days of the agreement, there was even hope that maybe our two churches might combine. We might once again begin to fill the church campus with new life. Things were looking up. And then they learned something about our church that changed everything. They learned that among the 10+ baptisms of adults that we had celebrated that year, we had baptized a gay man. Then 3 things happened. First, they evicted us from our office space immediately. Second, they alerted our denomination, and we were dismissed from the denomination. And then finally, COVID hit. We couldn't meet in the middle school gym for worship, obviously, so we had to do things online. We didn't even have a space for online worship, though, a place where we could safely collaborate on worship and music. Now, church finances then and now are always a matter of faith, but as a fledgling church, we couldn't afford to purchase property. And so we did what we could. We prayed. We discerned. What is God calling us toward? Had we gone astray? Was this somehow a punishment for our unfaithfulness? And then one day, my pastor received a call. On the other side of the neighborhood, there was an historic but dying Lutheran church. Their building was large because it belonged to a former era in which the pews were full. And so they jumped at the chance to house our small, young, and growing church plant. And they knew how we ended up here. And they felt that it was the will of God that our paths had come together. They told us they had a manse sitting empty. They couldn't afford to employ a pastor anymore. But at least this way, it would still serve the greater church. Our use of the manse would allow them to live into their vision to serve a neighbor in need. And so, this small manse of this small, dying Lutheran church became the soil of our church plant. Throughout the entire pandemic, that house became our church's headquarters. It was the lifeline that allowed our church to survive and thrive and grow into what it is today. And today, it's a thriving church. They have over 1,000 people in their network. They recently announced plans to acquire a $12 million campus that belonged to an historic but dying Methodist church. Now, speaking as a Presbyterian pastor, none of this makes sense unless you understand Christian discernment. A Baptist church isn't supposed to be shacking up with a Lutheran church or merging with a Methodist congregation. A church without a building shouldn't be where Christians, new Christians, are finding a church home. So many rules are being broken here. But Christian discernment tells us that this is the essence of our faith. That God looked upon you, who could not follow the rules to save your life, and He determined that His relationship with you outweighs everything. God decided that you are more important. Amen.